Hello and welcome to my channel. My name is Lynn and this is a flip video of the Crafter's Companion box number 29. This one's called Eclipse Stamping and it comes with a fantastic stamp set that you can stamp out your own floral patterns or floral sprays similar to the first card and this card here. And it also comes with a full alphabet die set. So that's always very handy to have. I'm a little bit addicted to alphabet die sets. And as I flip video, you'll find in this video I'll have at least one flat, one layered, one interactive, and one pop-up card. So if you want to see how any of these cards are made, please continue watching. Now, I do want to mention that in this first segment of the video, I'm going to show you how I stamped out the floral pattern of one of the cards that I showed previously. And so if this is something that you're not too keen to know about, as well as the coloring that I will be doing with color pencils, you may want to go ahead and fast forward to about the 3-minute mark where I actually start to create my first card. But I wanted to leave this in just to show my process and how I approach stamping out this floral pattern. And what I try to do is actually group the images as close together as possible, and sometimes even touching but not overlapping. And what's nice about this stamp set is that we get a lot of different flower patterns and in different sizes as well. So it does make it a little bit easier to kind of find a flower that might fit into a smaller space if you need it to. And I'm not overly concerned with the orientation of the flowers. I'm just trying, if I use the same one multiple times, I just try to have it be rotated in a different direction, just so that it doesn't look so cookie cutter. But otherwise, I'm not too worried about, where how everything's turned or anything like that. I think most of these stamps will work pretty well, almost in any direction. So also, I do like to stamp right off of the edge, and that way it allows your design to look a little bit more organic and not quite so boxed into the card frame. And for this particular panel, I am stamping on a panel and not my card front. And so chances are I'll probably trim this down, because when I do stamp on a panel, I cut my panel to the full size of the card blank, but oftentimes I'll trim it down just so that you get a little bit of a matte layer. And on that last stamping, as you saw, I just used some cardstock to do a little bit of masking, and that way I can stamp something behind. I try not to do too much masking because it just takes even more time to complete a stamping for just one panel. I'm going to be using the Jane Davenport Magic Wand colored pencils. These were the same ones provided to me by Spellbinders during the Jane Davenport Inspiration Hop that was held by Spellbinders not too long ago. And so I'm just doing a little bit of blending, where I use my mid-tone first to sort of block out my shadow areas, and then I'll go in with the darkest color to deepen those shadows, and then I'll go over everything with my lightest color. And because I'm working on a paper that it's not specifically a colored pencil paper, so it doesn't have a lot of tooth or texture to it, so often the last layer that I apply is usually the burnishing layer, where I really try to smooth everything out and press down really hard, but I don't really have to do that in this case. I'm using a cardstock that it's not a super smooth cardstock, but it's also not super textured either. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit closer just so that you can sort of see my technique. So here again, and I'm speeding it up quite a bit because this entire panel did take me about an hour to color. I'm not a very fast colorist. But there you saw I blocked in my shadows with my mid-tone. Now I'm going in with my darkest color. And these stamps are really nice because they give you those dark lines already that are an indication of where the shadows are. So you can just kind of follow that. And then the other rule I follow is if a petal looks like it's underneath another one, then I put a shadow there. And so here I'm going to go right over that with my mid-tone and bring it a little bit closer to the outer edge, but I'm leaving some white so that I can go in with my lightest color and then kind of smooth everything out, cover up all the white, and complete the image. So it is fairly simple coloring, but it does take some time, and I find it relaxing to just maybe put some music on, or put some Netflix on and just color. It's almost like, you know, coloring a page in an adult coloring book, except you got to stamp out your own image, and then the fun thing is, you know, I'll be able to create a card from this, and it's almost like, you know, sending somebody like your own little piece of art. So I think it's actually kind of cool and fun and relaxing to do. Although, you know, to be honest, it did take me a while. I don't know how quickly other people color, but it took a good hour to complete this one image. And for the set of cards that I made using this kit, I think I had 3 stamped images like this, where it was just a floral pattern across the width of the card. So you can see it's not a lot of images, but it's really fun when you see it all come together in its final shape. So for each of these, I'll just continue to go through. With the purple color, I didn't have a light purple, so instead of using purple at the very end, I just used a light pink, which I thought was kind of unique because it just gives a different look. And sometimes using a set of pencils that is a little bit more limited in colors helps you to kind of explore different combinations and different looks. So I thought that was kind of fun and different. I also colored, I think this particular panel I might have colored with my Prismacolor pencils, which does blend and is a lot creamier as it goes onto your paper. But they're both really fun to work with. And as a final touch on this card front, which I think is going to end up being my flat card, I'm using some pastel palette. I think this was called Chilled, and that's also a Jane Davenport product that was provided to me by Spellbinders. And I just used it to put a little bit of blue right behind that floral pattern so that everything feels like it's anchored and it's not just stark white. And this is how I'm going to sort of arrange my letters to be die cut. So I'm just using a stretch of Scotch tape. You could use some washi tape if you want. Now, I do make a mistake here that I actually do not catch until everything's all said and done. So when you're doing this, because I'm putting the cut side of the die face up, I do have to spell everything out, and I don't know if you saw it, but that N is upside down. And so it's well worth it to kind of double check yourself when you are kind of arranging your dies out like this. I was more focused on getting the dies to line up straight along my grid mat, and I wasn't focused on the orientation, especially because most letters are very they're really specifically in one direction, but that N can go in either ways. And the Scotch tape did lift a little bit of my pastel, so you saw me just kind of touch that up. The first time I cut through my panel of my colored panel, I was just really, really nervous because, as I mentioned, having taken like an hour to color it all in, it's a little bit nerve-wracking to die cut right through it. But the Eclipse look is it's really something different, something special, and because these letters will fit right back where they came from, it's actually that's where I realized that my N was upside down when I went to go put my drop shadow in. And so, you don't lose the effect of all of your coloring. And then the second error I made with this card is that I put the drop shadow for the S in the wrong spot. So a couple of mistakes, and a little bit unfortunate because it did take a while to color this in, and I don't know that I'll send this out to anyone because it does have those mistakes. But I just wanted to finish the card and give you the idea for how to create a flat card using the Eclipse technique, because often when you inlay these die cut pieces back in, you would use something like foam to have it have some dimension and actually pop up off of the card. But here I'm die cutting through our card base and nesting the letters right back in, so they fit back in really nicely when the card is closed, and it feels very flat still, but once you open it, you get that double benefit of being able to see the word thanks on the inside of your card as well. So that's my take on doing a flat version of the Eclipse card. So the two errors, you can still read everything, and if you weren't looking too closely, maybe you wouldn't notice it, but now that I know those two errors, it's hard for me not to see them. So I think honestly, like, it may not be the case that everybody would catch those, but all the same, I don't know that it's a card that I would send out to anyone, but I still like how it turned out. So my next card is going to be the first of 2 layered cards, and these come together really quickly because I'm using the pattern paper in this case. So I'm just going to put down my first matte layer, which is a nice solid colored cardstock that coordinates with the pattern paper that comes in the kit. And I really like the pattern papers that came this time. The colors are a little bit more muted. A lot of times the color palette for these boxes is very bright, and sometimes every once in a while we'll get something a little bit more muted, which I really like. And I've taken to trying to use up the extra strips that I have left over after cutting my mats and layers and putting them on the inside of the card, just to make use of those scraps so that I don't have them just hanging around in my craft room, and also just to bring some of the outside of the card into the inside of the card. So this is a more, I think, traditional way you would see an Eclipse card. So I've already die cut my thanks sentiment out of black foam. And if you don't want to die cut foam, you could die cut several layers of cardstock, either white or black cardstock, just depending. I like black because I feel like it helps the letters stand out a little bit better. And so you could die cut multiple layers and glue them together to give you a little bit of thickness and get your dimension that way. But I find foam just really convenient because you only have to run it through the die cutting machine the one time to get your all of your letters. And I chose the word thanks because I do need thank you cards, but also because it's a word that doesn't have repeat letters, so you can do all of your die cutting in just one pass, and you don't have to worry about multiple die cuts or leaving a blank space for a letter so that that gets used twice. So it's a really convenient, efficient die cut to make. This is another layered card, and just to show a similar but slightly different design from the traditional sort of Eclipse card. And one thing that I find with Eclipse cards is that when you inlay the letters back into the design, it can be a little bit hard to read. And I think that might be more so the case for maybe for older folks who, they just need something a little bit more high contrast, and, having just that slim kind of black as a just slim sort of shadow from the foam might not be enough contrast for them to really make out what the word or what the sentiment is. And so with this card, what I am attempting to do is to kind of help sort of resolve that for anyone who might be making a card that they're worried the person getting it might have a hard time reading it, but they still, like the look of an Eclipse card because it is so seamless and really clean and simple. So there are a lot of things that are really nice about this style of card, but one thing that might be a downside would be the legibility. So with this, what I'm doing is I've actually die cut the word thanks 3 times, and I didn't need a piece of black cardstock as large as what I cut, because really the only set of the only word that I want to really have that black show through is the middle thanks. The top and the bottom one, I'll actually be inlaying the die cut right back in, exactly as I did for the first card, where I've mounted it onto some foam, and then I'm just going to slot these right back in. And I'm very glad that I noticed before that wet glue dried, because the first T that I placed down was actually on the bottom-most row instead of the topmost row. And on this polka dot pattern, it's subtle, but there's a little bit of an ombre effect to it. So you do want to make sure that you've got all of your letters sort of in the right order, so that they go where they're meant to. And you can see here how the orientation of the N is supposed to be, as opposed to how I had it on my first card. So once I get all of these in and all of the bottom in, so you can see that even though the Eclipse style is not in the center word thanks, we still have some of that style of card with the top and bottom row. So you kind of get a little bit of that effect, but then you also have the benefit of that middle row where you can very clearly read the sentiment. So I think this is a nice compromise of best of both worlds, where you have that Eclipse design, but you still have something that's very legible and just something a little bit different as well. So one thing that I am not sure of in normal kind of traditional Eclipse cards is what you're supposed to do with like the center areas that get cut out. So for example, the letter A, where it's got that little triangle in the center, I'm not sure if generally you're supposed to inlay that back in as well. But when I looked at this, it looked kind of weird the way it was, and here's where I'm thinking about it and looking around for all those little pieces, because it seems strange to not have it, and definitely on the center one I wanted to put it because it just makes the A more complete and more legible, because we're using the negative space there. But then here I'm pondering, should I put the little triangle back in? And ultimately I did end up doing that because I felt like leaving it black, and again I put the wrong one in the wrong place, but leaving it black just called so much attention to it. It looked like it stood out too much. So I decided to inlay those little bitty pieces back in. So my tip is definitely keep all of your pieces so that whatever you decide to do, you'll have all of the pieces, and you have that option if you want. And once you're done with your card, then maybe toss out whatever bits you don't need. But here is my final flat card, second flat card. The next card that I'll be making is my interactive card. And again, I've just got some leftover bits and pieces that I'll figure out how to kind of put those on the inside of my card. And I don't do this a lot. And in fact, I actually didn't start doing it until I worked on this set of cards, and that's because I feel like I just have a lot of these little strips left over, and they're hard to use up, but I also find it hard to throw away. So I decided I want to try to like use everything as much as possible, and not accumulate a lot of bits. So I'm going to start off with a few mats and layers here. So I've got my solid color, I've got one of the patterns, and then I'm going to put another piece of solid colored cardstock down. And I've already done my die cutting, and if you remember from the intro, this is basically going to be a pull-up slider. So I'm going to put just a little bit of black cardstock behind here, and I've got black foam all the way around, including at the very top, which will be my stopper. See, there's my pull-up, and it extends a little bit on both sides at the bottom, and that's going to be what keeps this contained in the card so you don't pull it out completely. So I've put my slider panel all the way down to the bottommost that it can go, because at the bottommost position is where I want the letters to be inlaid back into each other. And if I had it to do over again, I would make the this panel, I think this panel is the size that it is because I stamped on a piece of scrap paper. And if I had it to do over again, I would actually make the panel a little bit larger just so that I had more room for the foam and the sliding mechanism. But I was able to make it work. It's a little bit of a tight squeeze, but it does fit and it does work. And so all I'm going to do is continue to inlay these letters right back in. And it's just a really nice, look. And I do like that, especially if you're going to stamp and color your own image, I do really like that you are putting all the pieces back in. So, all the effort of coloring can still be appreciated in full. So even though it was really hard for me to die cut through, at the end, I felt okay with it ultimately. But I'm gonna go ahead and just stamp out. What's nice about the stamp set is you don't get any large sentiments, but that's because we did get the complete alphabet, which in theory would spell out, your main sentiment, like thanks or birthday or whatever you want. But included in the stamp set are a lot of individual words that are smaller in scale and have a nice sort of cursive font to it. And they're just sort of extra sentiments that can go before or after your main sentiment. And you can kind of collage them together to create your full sentiment. So that's really nice. Now, earlier I did draw a line that represented the top of what you would see once this is all the way down and closed. And I just took a die out of my stash that will cut out a little thumb notch. So any die that you have that will just cut out that little half circle will work. And so all I'm going to do is go ahead and use my paper trimmer to just trim off to, in this orientation, the bottom and the top, so that I just have the notch. So the idea is that only the notch would be showing once this is pushed all the way down into the card. And I've just got a little stamp that says pull here as a little bit of an instruction so that whoever gets this card will know what to do. And I'm going to put, I'm using my dotted tape runner so that I can put some acetate behind the cutout portion of the word thanks. And that is so that it doesn't create any catch points with our sliding mechanism, since it'll be completely smooth there. And I did not think about it, but what I should have done was also use some Scotch tape to tape down the edges of the acetate. And here I realized I didn't cut exactly where I had drawn my line, so I'm just gonna trim a little bit off and really get that nice and flush so that when this is completely pushed all the way down, you don't see anything but the tab that's sticking up. And so once that's down, so you can see that it's really a tight squeeze. There's not a whole lot of space for that panel. So what I'm gonna do is, even though I'm using foam which has adhesive on it already, I'm still gonna use a little bit of liquid glue to give myself a little bit of time to get this in the right position, because I have to hold down the slider panel along with the top of the slider in order to put this down. So they have to both go down together. And then I realized, and it's a good thing that I was using liquid glue, because once I started to test this out, I realized I have another catch point, and that is because of the black cardstock that I have here. So I don't think that acetate creates much of any of a catch point, but this black piece definitely did. So whenever you're doing anything that has to move, if you have multiple layers of cardstock that is within that path, there's the potential for it to create a catch point where it would just sort of get stuck on that little difference of depth. And so just putting down some Scotch tape over that those edges will help smooth that out, so that whatever slider panel needs to move, it'll just glide right over it, and it won't be as an abrupt sort of change in dimension. So once I had that down, it definitely slides a lot better, but I do think that there still is a small potential for it to catch on the acetate. But I really love how this turned out, because you get sort of the full Eclipse, and then as you pull it up, it goes to white, and then it finally goes to black. So pretty neat, I thought. And I really wanted to challenge myself to do a flip of this kit, but really keep everything still in the spirit of an Eclipse style card. And so it did take me a little bit of time to kind of think up some of these designs, because it just didn't come to me very quickly. But ultimately, I do like how a lot of these turned out. So this will be my last card, and it's actually, I think, the one that you saw me coloring at the beginning of this video. And this is one of the pattern papers that comes in the kit, and because there's not much of it that shows, I did use a die to kind of cut out the center, just so that I can have that as a piece to use. And also because I did die cut the word thanks through my card blank, and I just didn't want to have to cut it through that pattern paper as well as this solid matte layer, and it wouldn't have been too much trouble. All I did was actually, starting with my stamped and colored panel, I die cut from there first, and then I lined that up with my blue layer and die cut out of my blue layer, and then I lined up my blue layer with my card blank, and then lined my die up with that. And so if you think that your machine can actually die cut through multiple layers, then you could sort of just adhere everything and then die cut it in one pass. But I didn't want to take that risk, and so I just die cut everything individually. Here I'm just using some of the organza ribbon that came in the kit, and I just thought it was a nice touch. I realized towards the end here that I hadn't used any of the embellishments that came in the kit, because we do get a set of ribbon, we do get some, I don't know, I can't remember now if it was gems or pearls, but I thought the ribbon was really nice, especially because it was sort of this more this softer sort of organza. So I thought that worked out really nicely with the color pencil coloring. Okay, so with my card front complete, I'm gonna start working on the inside of my card. So I just have this piece of scrap paper that is 120 pound, and I think it was cut down to 7 inches wide, and I think it's 1¼ inch tall. And so I've scored it at 5/8 of an inch. That's this first section that I'm putting glue on here now. And then my next score line is at 5 3/8 of an inch, and then I score again at just a smidge under 6 inches, because we want, once everything is closed up, all of this to close down nicely so that it all sits within the card. And so that leaves you about another 1 inch tab, which is where I put glue, and I folded it down and closed my card, and that way I can be sure that this will close down nicely and nothing kind of sticks out. So I did already die cut my colored panel, and I put a not a shadow layer, but sort of a highlight layer, because I'm putting this onto black cardstock, so I die cut it a second time out of, well, I didn't die cut it a second time. The die cuts that came out of the card blank were white, so I used that as a highlight, and so I offset that to just shifted it up and to the left of the floral die cut. So then you get a little bit of a highlight, and that helps everything stand out against the black a little bit better. And I did go ahead and stamp and color a bunch more images. And so, and then you don't get dies to cut out any of these floral images. So I did have to do a little bit of fussy cutting here, but I think that it turned out really well and was well worth the time. I used nearly everything that I stamped and colored, and especially since it does take me so long to color. I wasn't quite as generous as I normally am when I do things like this, where I don't know exactly the pattern or arrangement that I'll be creating, but I like to give myself like a lot of choices. But in this case, it just takes me so long to color that it went pretty minimal. But I still ended up with enough to create this nice, almost like a bouquet. And so I used the same colors and coloring technique as on the front of the card, so everything still matches. And with this final leaf, I'm actually cutting it up and just tucking individual leaves here and there, and just to, one, make use of it, but two, just make everything fill out a little bit better. So that's my pop-up card. I really like how that one turned out. I decided at the end that the organza ribbon at the bottom here looked a little bit plain, so I decided to just tie a really quick bow and attach this to the bottom of my card. And then I realized when I went to attach my ribbon that I put 2 strips of double-sided adhesive tape over the organza ribbon from the back side of the panel, but I actually didn't adhere it down. So it's a good thing I actually created this bow, because as I was pinching this together, I noticed that the edges or the corners of that panel were sticking up. I was just going to put some glue, and then I realized, oh, I've actually got adhesive tape under here that I never stuck down. So it's nice how things work out sometimes. So that is my pop-up card, and I didn't mention it, but where I cut the ribbon, I just put some of my fray check, and it's almost like glue, I think, where it just prevents the edges of your ribbon from fraying. And you'll find it in like sewing notions and sort of that area. It's used a lot in sewing. So here's a final look at my pop-up card. I really like how vibrant these color pencils are, and in general, I like how all of my cards turned out. This one I colored with my Prismacolors. I can tell because the purple actually is all purple and doesn't have the pink at the tips. And this is my flat card. Then I've got 2 layered cards, so one that is in the more traditional, and I do like how simple and easy some of these cards are, especially if you're not stamping and coloring. When you use the pattern paper, these 2 cards came together so fast. So if you do need quick cards, those are definitely good go-to designs. And then this is my interactive, where when you pull, this also has the nice benefit of, just increasing the legibility of the sentiment. And so if you're worried about somebody having a hard time reading it, and I also like at the end I did add an extra little sentiment to the panel, so when you pull that up, you do get that extra little note as well. And then this is my pop-up, where when it's closed, it looks like it's recessed, because it is, but then when you open it, you do get that beautiful floral design. It's very legible against the black, and still very much so an Eclipse card. So those are the cards that I made using this kit. It was a lot of fun to work with this kit and to challenge myself to create interactive and pop-up cards in the Eclipse style. If you like this video, please consider liking, commenting, and sharing. And if you want to catch future videos I post on my channel, hit the subscribe button and the notification bell. Thanks so much, and until my next video, happy crafting and have a fantastic day. Bye.